Playing the victim. Someone who plays the victim is an example of someone who uses morality to gain power, and that's what I want to explore in this essay. But before we can understand what it means to play the victim, we need to understand what it means to be victim. For this essay, we can define a victim as someone who is taken advantage of by another person, and we can call the act of taking advantage of someone a crime, and typically what we want for all these victims is justice, and justice is discussed by Nietzsche. Can be thought of us giving back to the victim what was lost when the crime was committed. In other words, you can think of justice as the repaying of debts. The criminal must repay the debt they acquired by taking advantage of the victim. I'm not saying this is what justice means, but this is the way many people understand justice. And this definition is important in the next content of this video. So what does it mean to play the victim? What separates a genuine victim from someone playing the victim? A genuine victim was actually taken advantage of, but someone playing the victim wasn't. And how do you determine whether someone was actually taken advantage of? It comes down to consent. Someone is taken advantage of when their presence is used in a way they didn't agree to. And so a true victim did not give consent or was not in a position to give consent, such as in the case of a child, someone who was severely intoxicated. But someone who plays the victim gives legitimate consent, and their claims they didn't, or they claim you consented to the things which you didn't consent to or were not in a position to consent to. I'll explore what both cases look like a little later on. So why would someone play the victim? To put it simply, they play a victim of someone will save them from their problems. They're looking for a rescuer. And how do they get a pupil to save them? Someone who plays the victim has two main weapons: obligation and guilt, and pity and disgust. Let's take a look at the first weapon, obligation and guilt. Here the person playing the victim claims that you consented to things that you didn't consent to or were not in a position to consent to. They impose an obligation on you and make you feel guilty for not living up to the obligation. They try to coerce you into playing a debt that you didn't not consent to take off. Let's look at an example. At the age of 22, Jane's husband left her with their two sons, Jamie and Michael. Jane told herself that she wouldn't dedicate her life to her sons and that in return they can never leave me. So keep that in mind. Jane is imposing an obligation on her sons. She is binding them into a covert contract, but they are children. They are not in a position to consent to such a contract. So how does this pay out? Jane will do anything for them as long as they don't leave her alone. But as they start growing up, naturally they start wanting to live their own life. They want to spend time with her, with their friends and lovers. And anytime they want to leave the house, anytime they want to do something without her, anytime she feels them creating some distance from her, and their mom uses guilt and obligation to make them stay. She says, after everything I've done for you, after all the time, energy and money I spent on you, you're just going to leave me? You are terrible sons. You should be ashamed. But is this fair of Jane to do? She imposed this contract on her kids. Will take care of you, long as you never leave me. When they were not in position to consent to such a contract, and whenever they seem to threaten her contact, she uses guilt and obligation to force them to complete again. Instead of handling the problem of loneliness in a mature yet healthy way, she emotionally blackmails her sons into rescuing her. Now let's look at the second weapon someone uses when playing the victim: pity and disgust. Here the person playing the victim claims that they did not give you legitimate consent when they actually did. They're trying to claim they didn't give you legitimate consent so that others feel pity of them and disgust for you. If people feel pity for them, they get people on their side and increase the chances that someone will come and rescue them. If people feel disgust for you, the person playing the victim turns people against you, which will increase the chances that you submit to their demands. Let's turn to our example. So Jane's attempt to use quilt and application works on one of her sons, Jamie, but they fail to work on Michael. Michael tells his mom that he's moving away to go to college. So what does Jane do when the quilt and obligation fail? She uses pity and disgust. She says to Jamie that the son who feels obligated to her, "Can you believe me? Michael would do that to his own mother. He took all my money and they let me all alone." She makes Jamie feel pity towards her, increasing the chances he'll rescue her, and makes him feel disgust toward his brother Michael, increasing the chances Jamie will abandon Michael or coercing him into submitting to his mother's demands. But it is fair for Jane to claim that Michael took all of her money and left. Remember, Jane's contract is, "I will take care of you as long as you never leave me." Jane was an adult when she chose and entered that contract for Michael, but Michael was just a baby. He was capable of giving legitimate consent, and he did, but she expected a mutual consent from Michael that he wasn't in a position to give as a child. And even if Michael was able to give consent, he might not have wanted to enter into that contract with his mother, of words supposed him in exchange for him never leaving her alone. So she gave him legitimate consent to receive her support as a child, but now that he is not meeting her demands, she's trying to claim that she never gave him a consent and that he took advantage of her. That's just one example of someone playing the victim, but it can happen in many different types of relationships between lovers, family, friends, or co-workers. But everyone who plays the victim has one thing in common: covered contracts. What's that? It's hidden expectation of someone else. Remember, I said the person can play the victim in two ways. First way is that they can give you a legitimate consent and then claim they never gave it to you. But why would they claim they didn't give it to you? Usually because they had a hidden expectation, a covered contract which you didn't live up to. And so now they want to claim they never gave a consent to punish you or to make you fulfill the hidden expectations they have. The second way that someone can play the victim is that they can claim you gave a consent when you didn't or were not in a position to. In our previous example with Jane, the mother, she might say to her son Michael, "You were never supposed to leave me." But that was such hidden expectation, a covered contract that Michael's mother had for him. Michael never gave a legitimate consent to that expectation. So how do we stop playing the victim or being manipulated by other people playing the victim? The answer comes back to mutual consent between people who are in a position to give legitimate consent. We need to be clear about what we want from others and what they return. And then we have to mutually consent to give one another those things. And in cases where the other party can't give us a consent, such as our children, we are only free to give up our consents to them, but we can't demand things of them all they aren't in a position to give us a consent for. As always, it's just my opinion and understanding, not advice. If you like the video, please consider liking the video. See you later.